Welcome, welcome, precious gospel kindred. We are happy you to meet and make you freely welcome.
Greetings from the Enfield Shaker Museum. My name is Michael O'Connor, and I'd like to welcome you to the fifth and final talk in our Winter and Spring series entitled From the Collection. Today's topic is Enfield sewing desks. Throughout the 19th century, as the Shakers were creating a built environment to accommodate their growing membership, they filled their buildings with furniture that was derived from forms common in the outside world. Even as they developed a design aesthetic that was an expression unique to themselves, the basic form and often the construction techniques of their furniture usually had direct comparison to the furniture of the world. One exception is the Shaker sewing desk, a form often considered unique to the Shakers with no exact comparable style commonly seen in the world. It should be noted that while we call these desks sewing desks, they could certainly have been used for any number of work activities, which would benefit from their spacious work surface and abundant storage. The first desk I'd like to share with you is also one of the very first pieces of furniture the museum ever acquired. A little different than some of the desks to follow, is likely earlier and points towards the idea that this form evolved over time. This piece is comprised of a base with an added gallery of drawers set on top. So let's begin by looking at the base. Looking at the table that forms the base, we see a lot of similarities to many of the pieces we saw when we looked at Enfield tables in the third presentation in this series. It has the very common Enfield turned leg with a ring at the transition from the square to the round and a gradual taper to the ground. This piece has a medial shelf. That's not unusual. It's known in Enfield furniture, and there are a number of pieces with one. I believe the shelf is original to the base. There's a scribe mark turned that indicates the upper edge of the mortise where the stretcher for the table is cut. So that appears to have been planned out with the original turning of the leg. The table has a single drawer in the front. This drawer does not have lipped or molded edges. It's set flush with plain edges and a hardwood knob. One interesting thing about this table is the wood that it's made of. It's not the yellow birch that we commonly see in Enfield furniture. The legs appear to be poplar, and the entire remainder of this table is pine. The two exceptions to that are this stretcher is some hardwood. I'm not positive. It may be ash. It may even be chestnut. And the pulls are also hardwood. These are a dense fine-grained wood. I'm not exactly sure what it is. So the poplar and the pine give this table a surprisingly light feel when you pick it up. This piece of trim around the perimeter of the work surface is one last interesting feature of the base. Let me illustrate what we're looking at. This is the work surface or the tabletop. This is the front edge of one of the sides of the upper gallery. And this piece of trim extends all the way around the perimeter of the tabletop. It originally stood proud of the work surface. It would encase the top, creating a tray top, if you would, preventing things from rolling off easily. The lower edge of the gallery sides is molded to fit snugly and closely to this proud section. So it appears that that extended all the way around the table. That type of tray top is also known in Enfield furniture. So again, not unusual or unexpected, but an interesting feature and a little perplexing as to why it has been cut off. Somebody did not find it useful at some point in time. We don't know when it was removed though. The upper gallery of this piece is comprised of 6 drawers, one of which has a locking mechanism over 3 cubbies. It's very finely joined and made. The framing of the drawer openings, all the pieces have a very graceful rounded front edge, and they're joined with these pointed, in this case 4 pointed joints ending here. If I remove one of the drawers, because this joint has opened up a little bit, we can see that this V that's molded into the edge of this piece extends back about a 1/2 inch, and then it goes to a full width piece that's let into a dado in the side of the drawers, and they are nailed from the outside. So this is interesting. It gives us a little insight into the construction. Again, it's very finely made. One thing that I'll point out that I have always found interesting is that this fine V-shaped joinery ends here. Does not exist at this joint here, or here, or here. It's possible that these two pieces that divide this cubby into two were added later, but we don't know, and that is certainly not for certain. Last thing I'd like to point out is the dovetail joinery that the upper edges of the gallery are joined with. In this view, we're looking straight down on the top of the gallery. I wanted to point out the joinery between the sides of the gallery and the top. They're very finely cut half-blind dovetails. The tails are quite thin and delicately made. This is an unusual piece of joinery for Enfield pieces. Half-blind dovetails are used almost exclusively between drawer fronts and drawer sides, hiding the joinery from the face or the outside of the drawer. But on a carcass, on the exterior or the case of a piece, this is an unusual use of half-blind joinery, one which I don't believe I've seen in any other Enfield piece. So very delicate, but an unusual use is interesting in this piece. When I began, I mentioned that we believe that this piece is made prior to some of the other pieces that we're about to see. One of the reasons we believe that is the knob. So the pulls on the drawers don't have as wide of a base as we'll see typically in Enfield knobs later on. They're also not attached with a screw through the face of the drawer, but a relatively small tenon protruding through and secured. So wooden tenon of a relatively small diameter and a knob that doesn't have the knife edge broad base that we'll see on later pieces. In fact, we're about to see it on some other pieces of furniture. So that's a common knob we see on early Enfield pieces, and one of the pieces of evidence that leads us to believe this piece is also early. The last feature of this table we'll look at today is hard to illustrate, but I'll stand next to the table. I'm not tall, but you can see this is quite a low table. At 23.5 inches above the floor, it's several inches lower than any of the other work tables that we'll talk about today. I brought a chair in to illustrate that this is not a comfortable work height at any normal sized chair. The table came with these little feet for the table to sit on. These are made very oddly. They're roughly turned. This middle part is hand carved, and it looks like this is a little bit better turned, but still this is a contrived system that somebody came up with to raise the height of the table. When we look at the very bottom of the feet, we notice that there are some carved facets on the bottom of all 4 feet. It's highly likely that this table, at least at some time, stood on casters. We do have a number of examples of tables with this evidence on the base of their feet and low tops that indicate that at least some were probably either made or retrofitted with casters by the Shakers for their use. The next desk I'd like to share is probably what you had in mind when we mentioned Enfield sewing desk. This is pretty much the classic form. Yellow birch construction throughout, very well designed and very well executed mortise and tenon joinery. There are pine panels, and the interior drawer parts are pine as well. A very large work surface, a gallery above with, in this case, 6 small drawers. And in the base, this very pleasing but asymmetrical alignment of 3 narrower drawers on the front of the desk and 3 wider drawers on the side of the desk. So sitting in front, you still had access to these 3, but you have access to these deeper drawers from the side. These are made in both left-hand and right-hand versions, so there does exist symmetrically opposite alignment of drawers to this. This particular one has an added shallow drawer at the bottom. This was not part of the original construction of the piece, clearly added afterwards. But there are other examples of this too, so it was maybe for patterns or other flat things that could be stored away in there. And the last thing I'll point out here is it has an extendable work surface with breadboard ends that tucks out of the way when not needed. Here's a look at the front narrow drawers, 3 drawers with more of the classic Enfield knob with this very finely tapering and quite broad base. The base of the knob is about the same diameter as the crown of the knob. Lipped and molded drawers, a single locking mechanism, but interestingly, all the drawers have this oddly contrived after the fact locking mechanism. Something could be dropped down through that hole and it would engage the back of the drawer rail to secure it. And I think this cute little leather pouch is for the key for the drawer above. So there's an interesting, somewhat quirky thing. All the framework of this is fully mortise and tenon and pegged, and we didn't have a chance to see it earlier, but it's the classic Enfield leg with a ring at the transition. Here's a look at the upper gallery. The gallery is integral to the entire construction of this. It's not an add-on gallery like we saw in the last piece. The 6 drawers have smaller knobs, but with the same basic shape. The size of the knob is typically commensurate with the size of the drawer. Each knob is attached with a single screw through the back of the drawer front. The drawer rails are continuous. You can see the joint here and peg where they're secured. The stiles in between here are half lapped into this continuous piece here. So it's some interesting joinery. It's effective. It seems to be very stable, but it's very nicely executed as well. Looking into the drawer openings in the upper gallery, you can see here's that continuous rail, and it's hard to see, but the stile is half lapped into it right here. The drawer runners are pine, and it's maybe hard to see, but in the back there's an interesting little feature. There's a small wedge added on both sides that kicks the back of the drawer up, allowing it to sit flush, compensating for wear in the rail or the runner of the drawer. This piece is currently on display in our Rosetta Cummings exhibit, and here it is with a Enfield rocker displayed in front of it. So you can see it's quite a comfortable work height and a generously proportioned desk for whatever work the sisters would be doing at it. Displayed above this desk on the wall in the Rosetta Cummings exhibit is a wonderful photo courtesy of Hancock Shaker Village. This is one of the photos taken by John H. Tarble in 1907, taken in the trustee's office, showing Rosetta Cummings sitting knitting in front of a desk very similar to the one we've just had a look at. We're on the 5th floor of the Greystone dwelling, where it is both very warm and poorly lit. So sorry about the quality of the video. I've done about 30 takes on this piece because it befuddles me. And I think we're going to leave it at, in its form, it evokes an Enfield sewing table with drawers below, large work surface, gallery of drawers above. But in its design and execution is not of the same genre of the things that we are also seeing today. The woods are maple for the tops, butternut for the drawer fronts and the sides. The Enfield hardwood knobs look great. Proper wood, proper design, and they're secured with a single screw. But the rest of it's very contrived. The joinery is badly designed. Inside there are layer after layer of boards screwed one to the other to create the drawer runners, etc. There's a lot of mystery to this piece. It does not come with great provenance, but it evokes an Enfield table. So I have included it because it points out that we don't know everything, especially about the later years here, when there were woodworkers who possibly were not classically trained or as skilled as some of their earlier counterparts. It may be using reclaimed materials, pieces of wood from other furniture projects, but in some aspects like the knobs and the general overall form, it looks pretty good. So it's a mystery. I'd love to hear what you think of it, but I think it makes a great counterpart to the last, our counterpoint to the last sewing desk that we're going to take a look at. We're in room 1 of the Great Stone Dwelling to look at our last sewing desk of the day. This wonderful piece is reminiscent of the desk we saw over in the Rosetta Cummings exhibit. Notice that it's the opposite, so the drawers are on the right-hand side of the front compared to the other desk where they were on the left, and the wide drawers are on the left side of this. I just measured, they're both the same depth, but this one's a little bit wider, and note that it's got 4 across, so 8 drawers in total, 2 rows of 4 across in the upper gallery. The design and construction techniques are very similar to the other one, so let's have a close-up look of some of that. Like its 6-drawer gallery counterpart, it's got a classic Enfield leg with a ring at the transition. When we look at the drawers on the side, we see there is one with a single locking mechanism, but I'd also like to point out that the drawers on this side have the remains of a separate locking mechanism. Something engaged this mortise in the bottom of the drawer. It was attached to the back of this rail, and the 2 screw attachment points can be felt right here. So this drawer and the one below it could be secured with those mechanisms, and then the top drawer would be lockable, which would prevent access to any of them. Lipped drawers with molded edges, classic Enfield knobs. The entire frame of this piece is yellow birch, and again, very nicely designed and executed mortise and tenon joinery, all pegged. It's very solid and has withstood the test of time quite well. Moving to the narrower stack of drawers that's on the front side of the piece, we again see a single locking mechanism, and on this, the other 2 drawers have an even more interesting built-in mechanism. I hope this will focus. This is a piece of very dense, almost grainless hardwood, carefully let in. You can see some scribe marks. And ramped inlet here, or recess here, to give access to there. So something from the drawer rail below would be, or actually the runner, would be turned up to engage that, stopping the drawer from retracting. This drawer has it as well. It's not located in the same spot. It's a couple inches further back. Whatever was used to engage this, the holes can be felt along the runner or where it was originally mounted, but it's gone now. So again, you could mechanically lock the 2 drawers, and when you locked this with a key, you wouldn't be able to open any of them. Kind of interesting. Extendable top rail or work surface. again with a breadboard end. Here is one of the drawers from the upper gallery. Let's take a minute to look at some of its design features. There's that classic Enfield knob with a crown and a base about the same diameter and hollow between. Little shoulder right here and a knife edge. That is secured with a single screw through the back. Lipped drawer. This has a less pronounced lip on the bottom, but there is a lip there. And the drawer edges are molded. I think you can see that from this shot. As is tradition with the Shakers, half-blind dovetails on the front, through dovetails on the back. These drawers, I hope this shows up. The bottom piece is let into a groove in the lower half tail. So on these drawers, these are the tails. So the drawer ends with a half tail and the groove for the bottom is entirely within the half tail. Sometimes they end with half pins, but this set ends with half tails. And I think right here we can see well how just very beautifully precise that joinery is. Scribe marks indicating the extents of the through dovetails, and the joinery is very tight. Bottom is let very neatly into the grooves around three sides and then nailed in the back. Flush. So I'll turn that up for you as well. So beautifully executed, very fine. A nice example of common drawer design on a shaker piece, but very well executed. The lighting's a little better here, so I wanted to point out again, here's one of the drawers from the front of the dresser, or of the front of the sewing desk, and here's that piece that was part of the locking mechanism. I don't know what this wood is, but it's virtually grainless, virtually poreless, very, very dense and carefully let in. And there's a scoop right in front of it. It's got a very clean 90-degree shoulder on one side and a scoop here, giving access to whatever the locking mechanism would contact this surface. Here's a look at the bottom board bevel here, very smoothly implemented on all sides, allowing this board to fit into the groove in the sides. Front half-blind dovetails and rear through blind or rear through dovetails. And there's a good look at the bottom into the groove in the half tail and the taper that narrows the bottom down to fit in. Shortly after this piece arrived, a woodworker who does a lot of millwork and doors and things like that for us was here visiting. And as he looked this over, his comment was, "That's a lot of joinery to keep track of." And he's really got that spot on right there. And I hope I can illustrate that looking in here. So this is the drawer openings on the right-hand side of the upper gallery. Here's that continuous rail I mentioned, and the style is half lapped into the rail. The pine drawer runners are L-shaped, and they're mortised into, I believe, this piece in the back. This is the frame corner post. This piece is tenoned into a mortise in that corner post, and this down here is part of the frame of the back. So this is an intermediate piece joined into the back corner post. Here's a piece of the back frame joined in the corner post, and it's quite sophisticated, it's quite elaborate, and it's quite elegant. And that density of complex joinery is seen throughout this entire piece. Thank you for joining me for this look at Enfield, New Hampshire sewing desks. I hope to see you soon at another program at the Enfield Shaker Museum. And I'll leave you today with a few more views of this desk from all sides.